Welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk. Today, TrueNAS 25.10.2 is out. We're going to recap the highlights of this release for you, but also of 25.10 in general for those who are waiting for the general release version to come out. Kris is also going to talk about using AIs and Model Context Protocol, or MCPs, to talk to his TrueNAS system, literally, and he's actually getting an answer. Stick around. Thanks for joining us on the show again this week. Again, just a reminder for us, please do those usual YouTube things. Give us the like and the subscribe to TrueNAS Tech Talk. Otherwise, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to make Kris code in Perl for an entire week. Won't be allowed to touch anything.
Oh my God. I think coding in Perl is considered a war crime in most civilized countries at this point. So yeah, let's not do that.
And you threatened by ECC, you asked for it.
Oh man, that's rough. Anyway, yeah, please don't make me do that. I haven't had to touch Perl in a long time, and I don't want to go back. It's almost as bad as saying Kris has to do some PHP these days.
Okay, I can sympathize with you on that one.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, back to the important news, though. So this week, TrueNAS 25.10.2 dropped. By the time you're watching this podcast, it should be available for download from our website and upgrade from directly within the TrueNAS UI. It's a nice little maintenance update. We've wrapped up a lot of new features and improvements in there. Over 100 bug fixes. Again, thank you to those members of our community who are helping us test out the nightly releases, find those bugs, those weird edge cases, interacting with us back and forth. When you give us reproducible information and when you help us out with debugs and stuff on the forums, again, that's really a big value to us, the engineering team. First step in fixing a bug is reproducing it. So again, if you've got that information and you're finding something, hey, reach out to us, let us know. But, let's go through some of the highlights here, Kris. What do we do?
I'll say let's start with more of the generic 25.10 highlights, because this might be some folks' first opportunity to test, or they're just about to upgrade and jump for the first time, so they maybe haven't caught up for everything that happened from .0 and .1. But the high-level highlights, before we get into the specifics of .2, of course, there were some big updates to OpenZFS. We went to 2.3.4 in the 25.10 series. There's some cool new backend functionality with the ZFS rewrite command that's available for kind of rebalancing data on your pools. We've covered that in previous episodes, so feel free to refer back to that. Some space efficiency, some reporting improvements. So on the infrastructure side, Linux kernel's been updated to 6.12.33, usually a handful of good fixes to get there as well. And I think we got some additional NVIDIA support. Is that right, Kris?
Yeah, we've got most of those Blackwell cards in there. There's a couple that are missing just because of the driver revision we're using. I think the RTX 5050 isn't there, so one of the newer low-end cards. And on the opposite end, I think we might be missing something for like the, RTX 5000 Pro 72 gigabyte one. That might have come for a ride along when we got the RTX Pro with the lesser memory. But for those, the RTX 5050 is the one that I've seen asked for a couple times on the forum. That one should hopefully be coming along with TrueNAS 26, sports in the nightlies. But again, that's a nightly. So if you're just looking at this now, maybe pump the brakes on that one a little bit. But what else do we have going on in here?
Well, as a reminder, the versioned API, that was a big deal. That's what enables us to go do these third-party integrations with things like Proxmox, the CSI driver we've written for Kubernetes. Actually, we'll be talking about some tooling later on in today's episode about where we're using the API as well. So that's super important. It means once you write a tool externally using the API, it should stay version controlled and functional until that API gets retired down the road, hopefully years down the road. And then security hardening. So if you're an enterprise customer, of course, STIG compliance is a big deal. As much as we hate to have to use that in times, it's required in a lot of secure environments. And FIPS 140 support, again, for the enterprise side of the business. And then improved API auditing and diagnostics, which is always good to have as well.
Yeah.
And then I think we had a slew of goodies in the VMs and app side as well.
We do. We definitely did a lot of work on VMs and apps. There was some ask for that, and there was a lot of changes in 25.04, and 25.10 is where we think we've landed on a real solid setup here. So we've got some improvements in virtualization itself. You can now import and export VMs from a variety of formats. You no longer have to do any command line shenanigans with bringing it to your system and then, DDing it to a raw ZVol. You can just basically take that VM template, import it through the web interface in the UI and say, hey, I want to deploy a version of this that shows up as a pre-formatted package. On the app side of things, we also enabled a better solution for apps migration. So again, if you started with a hybrid pool and you managed to get a couple of SSDs in there that you're going to dedicate for certain parts of your apps, you can now migrate your entire apps pool over there. we also improved our HA support for virtualization and for apps.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can, on your enterprise hardware, you can now use those, our virtualization solutions to get your workloads that really have a lot of storage demand. They need that low latency. You can park them right on the storage hardware and, benefit from that. You'll have a lot lower than even any sort of network layer. We also did some third-party integrations here, Chris. Veeam was a good one.
I was going to say that actually relies on the HA VM support as well. Veeam released their software appliance, which is great. You can host basically a Veeam on a box. It's all running on the storage array, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, turnkey storage and backup appliances are ready to go, and they're really interesting that way. And of course, we extended this into the TrueNAS Connect service, so you can see and monitor your apps and VMs through there. Actually hooked up a couple more of my machines into Connect and found out, I'm like, hey, I actually left a VM running on one of these boxes. I completely forgot about it. So I gained myself another 4 gigs of RAM back on that machine rather than having it sitting on a VM that wasn't doing much.
Nice. Well, then on the protocols and services front, this was the first release that added that NVMe over Fabrics, which is next-gen block storage. So, of course, NVMe over TCP available in the Community Edition. If you need RDMA, you can come to the Enterprise Edition. That's where that's available. And then also terabit Ethernet, 400 gig and above speeds, especially with RDMA support on the Enterprise side as well. That's pretty cool. Like I say, really pushing the envelope of what we can deliver.
Yeah. I'm enjoying that one for sure. Like that's where we got our R60, and I'm joking, hey, it's our R60 because we can get 60 gigabytes a second out of that thing over RDMA. Yeah. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's blazing fast. I remember many years ago, people were like, oh, you can't, ZFS probably can't go that fast. It's like, well, guess what? Yes, it can.
Surprise.
And then some. So there's still even more improvements coming on the performance side. So looking forward to 800 gig and beyond. All right. And then on the WebUI side, of course, iSCSI, some Docker YAMLs, monitoring pages were improved. There's an update advisor. That's a big one, by the way. If people haven't jumped to 2510, when you get on the 2510 branch, we did a whole kind of explainer on this in a previous episode on how the whole update UI and user experience has been improved and changed. Very nice. You can see your release notes right in the UI now, not have to go click and look somewhere else. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's going to be a big benefit here. We'll link back to that episode where we talked about it, and of course, you can see it on the screen here where I'm showing. Again, some people have said, "Hey, where's the general release?" That one should be live now, hopefully, with the 2510.1 now reaching general. And then once you are on there, you will see the notification for 2510.2, and of course, you'll get your upgrade. And then going forward, you'll also see that when TrueNAS 26 lands and it says, "Hey, this is acceptable for early adopters," and when it filters down to your general use case, you'll say, "It's ready for you. Are you ready for TrueNAS 26?"
So that's kind of the high level of just 2510, the series in a nutshell. But let's get into some of the specifics of the .2 release, because this is, again, the second big dot release of the series. It's taken a little while. We've been, of course, working on it internally for quite some time, taking feedback from the community, looking for issues to address just to make this the most rock-solid TrueNAS out in the wild. So first up, one of the first critical fixes that was addressed here was some people updating from 25.4 to 25.10 occasionally would have seen a boot device error where it said boot variable, no space left on device. That has been resolved. Always more fun to go fix things with Grub, but that's what it ended up being in this case.
Now, this one was related to EFI partitions, wasn't it? That basically it was, you would run out of space on that little EFI stub volume that said, hey, here's where you're tracking your boot volumes. So we basically did a fix there. So now those of you who were stuck on 2504 and couldn't do that upgrade, give it a shot again with the .2. Should hopefully be able to clean it up and get you migrated to 2510.
Yep. Next up, we had some fixes for the SMB service. If it failed to start up when you had legacy ACL configurations, that's going to be corrected now as well. I forget how old some of those legacy ACL configs were. It's been a while since I looked at the details on this one, but it sounds like that the update's going to go ahead and automatically convert those legacy permissions to the current format, so you won't be left behind.
Yeah, this is another one of those things where I believe we had a problem with the 2504 upgrade for those who had started way back in the FreeNAS days and upgraded all the way in place through to 2504. There were some issues there with the boot devices and, legacy dataset permissions. I think there was a couple more, but it's good to keep seeing these. And this is what, helps us with the community. When you bring these up and say, hey, here's the problem. Here's my history of use with FreeNAS and TrueNAS. That usually can help us narrow it down. Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive to see some people have TrueNASs that have pools and data that span back literally that far, a decade or more in many cases. That's pretty sweet. Okay, next up, we have some ZFS pool import performance improvements and write operation responses. So the pool, we have the ability now to limit the time async destroy operations can run per transaction group, which was preventing operations from blocking pool imports and other write operations. So pull imports that maybe took a long time before due to prolonged destroy operations now are going to complete much more quickly. So again, one of those things, maybe you've never seen this or experienced this, or maybe you're going to update and go, oh, something just got faster. Cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things where somebody said, hey, I deleted like 6 terabytes of old data that I'm never using, and why is my system going so slowly? Well, it's all those asynchronous destroys. It let it basically do that destroy and return back control to you quickly, but ZFS in the background is going, I got a lot of housekeeping to do. So now it's sort of partitioning it out into a little bit more manageable chunks. It might mean it takes a little bit longer for you to actually see that capacity show as free space again, but it shouldn't be something unless you're sitting there watching your terminal and counting up your DF values to go, hey, why didn't I get all of my bytes back instantly? I don't think it's something you're going to notice. But what you will notice is that your system's going to be more responsive, more reactive. So beneficial trade-off here.
Import time. Yep.
100%.
Okay. And then we have some fixes to disk validations that were incorrectly reporting identical capacity drives. That's an annoying one where we were seeing drives saying these other drives, these peers are too small, and I'm trying to replace drives with an identical capacity model. So that's a good one to have fixed. Again, thank you to the users who reported that.
Yeah, we fixed some excessive API calls during selections in the web interface. So basically, it's going to solve the problem where it was doing an API request for every keystroke because it's trying to do the autocomplete when you're writing in a username. It's basically a little bit faster, more responsive. Hey, just wait for you to finish typing a little bit more when you've paused and you're now looking and waiting for the system. Then it's going to check and say, okay, which of these users does this match? Rather than doing it for every keystroke.
Cool. And then in the background, so we have some optimizations in the background for apps. So we have a lot of people who are community users who watch this podcast who probably run way more apps than even I do, which is awesome. There's been some improvements to make the background CPU usage go way down in that case, where we're able to reduce some of the async IO loops running in the background, where we had repeated container inspection operations that were holding global locks, which are always a bad thing. And we try and eliminate those wherever we can find them. So take a look. If you're a heavy app consumer, you might see some reduction in overall kind of CPU load.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of free space considerations, we fixed the dashboard widget bug where it was showing unknown for the used in free space for secondary storage pools. That was something that was specific to the dashboard widget. But, the dashboard isn't much good if it doesn't show you everything on the one page. Hey, that's its purpose. So again, fixing little bugs like that. Some people may never have seen them because they just said, hey, I jumped to storage every time. But now it's on that front page. We want that front page to be useful. And we set all this capability for you to edit your widgets, drag them around. We want you spending a little bit of time on there, at least when you log in the first time.
Great. And then another, again, insidious one, fixed an issue where if you have unusual or I guess wrong invalid IPv6 routes in the routing table, it prevented access to getting in and changing things in the network, app management, bug reporting. Not a good situation. The system's now going to handle that a bit more gracefully in case you do somehow end up with invalid route entries instead of becoming unresponsive. Again, annoying, but good to have that fixed.
Yeah, IPv6 is a challenge sometimes. I think we also tucked another bug in there for formatting for Active Directory joins when you're using like Kerberos in there. So it understands, hey, there's going to be some square brackets in here. So rather than passing those along, it's actually able to, resolve and format those correctly. It's escaping those.
Yeah.
We added a little bit of a network control here for SMB as well, didn't we? We added hosts allow and hosts deny for SMB shares. That was something that, was a bit of a request for people to say, hey, can I have these sort of more blanket level controls if I don't want anybody to even be able to get at my SMB at all?
Okay.
That was beneficial.
Yeah, and then another one is directory service users now appear in the default users view without requiring you to go adjust the filters. So again, if you have if you're connected to AD or LDAP and you need to go in and find a user real quick, it's great. It's just going to show up as soon as you start typing in the filters.
Cool. Yep.
Let's see, what else here? We resolved issues where SSH access options appeared to save without an error, but then the SSH indicator persisted in the user's list. So now you can properly disable SSH access to the web interface. That's a good one.
Yeah. How about the session expiry bug? This one was hard because a lot of us never saw it. I mean, I didn't tend to see this issue, but apparently it would be ignoring your session timeout settings. We've showed you where you can find that to adjust. And people were saying, hey, even when I update this to be a much higher limit of, 15 minutes or an hour, it was still logging me out when I would idle for a minute, or if I hit F5 to refresh a page, it would terminate my session and kick me out and I'd have to log in again. But that one should be fixed now. If you still see it, please let us know on the forums in the comments somewhere. Just say, hey, this is still a problem after 25.10.2.
And make sure you mention which OS and browser too, because that's sometimes relevant to those kind of bugs.
Crucial.
And then next up, we fixed some issues with certificate management for certificates with very large distinguished name fields. So any certificates that had fields exceeding 124 characters, which can happen if you have many subject alternative names, those can now be properly imported and managed. So that's good.
Yeah, you'd have to make an effort to get there, but especially if you've got a long subdomain or you're really, pointing them out or using a lot of alt names, you could get there. But that's one of those things where it's a limit there, but, okay, fine. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. We'll fix that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then let's see, next up, a cloud sync task. We resolved a data inconsistency issue where if you had the bandwidth limit field on the cloud sync task and it contained empty objects instead of empty arrays, it prevented the UI from displaying the task in its entirety. Again, kind of an edge case. You have to work hard to get yourself in that situation, but a good thing to track down and fix.
Yeah, we also fixed some of the cloud sync validations for the S3 endpoints there. So now it includes the HTTPS protocol has to be in there. If you left that out before, it would just tell you invalid endpoint. So it's about giving you better, clearer guidance during creation and configuration for your cloud sync tasks. Always helpful there.
On the block side, so we resolved an issue with iSCSI where unsaved changes pop-ups appeared unexpectedly after saving, which then, of course, threw duplicate item errors because it had been saved. So now the wizard pane is going to close properly. That's mostly a UI bug, but again, great to get fixed. Just a little usability issue.
Yeah. Hey, we fixed a couple more usability and user interface things. So we fixed some error notifications that were accidentally displaying placeholder text. That definitely was, our bad. It shouldn't just say, error warning rather than something a little bit more descriptive. And we also made the dialogue better for the long error messages. So, instead of having to actually zoom out when you've got one of those really lengthy errors, you should now be able to, see this better and have proper scroll bar support when you're doing that. When you do have something that's got one of those really long, dumps with a bunch of Python or something in there, you should just be able to grab the whole thing, go through it with a scroll bar and start at the bottom. That's usually where the actual root cause of your error is. And then you can copy that and bring it up.
So last but not least, and I find this one very amusing, Chris. So we fixed an issue where the system is going to now lock the root account group membership to the built-in groups, and it prevents modifications to the UI. This prevents accidental removal of required privileges that could cause things like, scheduled tasks, cloud sync, cron jobs, and other system functions to fail. And of course, there's a proper way to disable the root account if you want by disabling the password, blah, blah, blah. I'm picturing who did that. Which of you did that and was like, hey, I'm just going to go willy-nilly remove groups from my root account. And then, oops, stuff got broke. Anyway, fun bug. I'm sure somebody did it. It's probably somebody who listens to this show.
Yeah, I get the temptation to say, I want to lock these things down. I want to remove that. Typically, if we put somebody into that root membership on TrueNAS, we probably did it for a reason. If you wanted to put yourself in there, I mean, it is your system. You already have root. Don't make your regular user account root. It's not the best way to operate things.
Oh, that's a funny one. Users always find every little clever edge case where it's like, I hadn't thought anybody would try that. But
and I'm sure they're going to find some more when 25.10.2 gets into their hands, and should be there now, actually. Let's take a little over under here on how long it is until somebody surfaces a new bug where we look at it and we go, we never thought to use it that way, Chris.
Yeah, hopefully not for a while. The .2 at this point is pretty darn stable, and we're pretty pleased with it. We've been running it internally here for quite some time. And again, kind of going through this list, you can see some of the very edge nature of a lot of these issues we're fixing, because by the time you get to a .2, those are what's left to fix. You're not fixing big major issues. You're fixing just these little, like, oh, wow, you have to do these 18 things in sequence to hit this particular bug, and it be on a full moon kind of thing.
Yeah. But hey, that was quite the list there. So again, 2510.2 should be out now, available for your download. If you're interested in getting it, you can go to our download page. You can go to your updates page in the TrueNAS UI and grab that fresh release. By all means, test it out. Report back to us, in the comment section on our forums, through our email, t3@TrueNAS, if you like. We can't guarantee a response every time. We will try to reply when we can. If we're going to use your question on the show, we'll try to give you a heads up so that you know to tune in. But that's it for sort of routine news. So let's talk about something a little bit exciting here, Chris, in terms of what you've been working on the side with the what we'll call the TrueNAS Labs here.
Yeah, so now it's time for something completely different, which actually isn't all that different because we've been talking about AI in previous episodes. And of course, we do tend to talk about TrueNAS here from time to time as well. So this is an interesting opportunity where we have an intersection between these two topics, and we can talk about that. So we've pushed something out just recently, which we'll be discussing here in more detail, a new research preview that we want to cover with you today and get some feedback on. Specifically, we're talking about an MCP, which is a Model Context Protocol tool that can be used to allow any LLM of your choice that supports MCP to connect in and then drive around your TrueNAS system. So before we go any further, I'll say this will be available by the time this show airs. You can go to labs.truenas.com. and you'll get taken to a GitHub landing page where we're going to be pushing hopefully more kind of researchy kind of preview tools, which means they're not fully supported yet. This isn't something we're officially releasing, putting in the product. I'm not accepting bug requests for it, all that good stuff. But it's interesting in that we want to get it into people's hands and get feedback and hear how people, love, hate, what they enjoy about this. But let me refer back to a previous episode real quick, if you'll indulge me here. We were talking about the future of agentic AI and how it has the very real possibility to kind of reshape how we interact with software and services in a very UX sense. It might become the next logical evolution of what a good user experience is, rather than having to go learn how to navigate around visual UIs, looking for a feature here, a setting there, or where to find that task. It means we get to use more natural language to become the mechanism for how management things are accomplished. So we used the example of trying to book a flight, I think, in the previous episode, where, of course, there's a million different booking services and airlines and aggregate services, and we've all used a bunch of them over the years. And it is a little annoying to go to a new one, then you have to learn, well, here's how their booking form works. Here's how I go and change the details of my flight. Here's how I filter. They all have the exact same functionality. At the end of the day, you're booking a freaking flight, but they all have different UX to accomplish essentially the exact same task. Input my requested dates, review the results, select my seat, book, and then put it on my calendar. And then maybe in the background, I'm gathering the receipts and inputting it into the business expense system, blah, blah, blah. So an LLM can abstract it all away potentially in the future with no clunky or even a good UI to have to learn each time.
Yeah, this is something that I actually saw when I was trying to book some flights recently. It looks like Google is starting to push some sort of AI thing there where you can say, hey, I'd like to input my parameters of what I want. Start looking for a flight for me. And this is the kind of thing where if this was something where I said it's a hey Google or hey Siri kind of thing, it might not be considered AI. People just say, oh, it's just some kind of feature. Is this AI? Is this machine learning? It's one of those kind of, it blurs the boundaries. But what you're talking about where we need this standardized thing, it's almost like we need an API for everything. And that's kind of how MCPs start to lean. You're like, hey, it's a universal interface. We could get to the point where all I have to do is just pick up my phone and say, hey, internet, I want to go from where I'm at. I got to get to Las Vegas for this time for the NAB show coming up in April. Here's my time. You know where I live. You know where my closest airports are. Find me one that doesn't make me sit there for, a 4-hour layover somewhere, but also isn't having me having to sprint across the terminal in 30 minutes. And it'll just lay it all out for me. It can give me a response. It can say, hey, by the way, we also booked you an aisle seat. We're over here. We used your proper, loyalty program for these flights and everything. So you don't have to remember which code you're using.
And I even filed the expense report at the end too, with the receipt
Absolutely.
attached and everything, right? Like, wouldn't it be
Perfect.
wonderful? So again, if we're starting to talk about doing this with services like airline and flights, so how about other local software or appliances in your house? How come those have to be any different? So over here at TrueNAS, of course, we're constantly doing little internal projects. We're pushing the boundaries on to see where these things go, what the future might hold. And we're going to occasionally release things to get community feedback. That's one of the cool things about being an open source, open core company, especially when we think something shows promise. So we've gone ahead again, pushed that new site where you can go download this research preview tool to test drive what this might look like and how you could potentially marry up your local LLM, or again, you could be using OpenAI or Claude or whoever through an MCP connector. So what does this actually do? Well, let me give you some examples. So personally, I've been working on this because it's an interesting research project, but also because I, like most engineers, am pretty lazy at times. And I get annoyed at having to do repetitive tasks over and over again. I'm looking for more efficient ways to avoid that. I have several TrueNAS systems I administrate and manage at home, of course, and in addition to the ones we have here at the office. And I just wanted to be able to just talk to them or ask questions and get them to go do things. So for example, I can hit a button on my keyboard. I can use voice dictation and say, hey, can you go check my fleet of systems and tell me if any systems have health issues or alerts that need addressing? Great. The AI goes and talks to the MCP, which queries all the API calls on the TrueNAS and gives me a nice summary back. Nope, everything looks good. Or, oh, hey, there's 2 alerts firing off on this TrueNAS. Do you want to go address them, kind of thing? Or my other favorite go-to, because I run a lot of apps on my home systems, can you go check the status of all my applications and let me know if there's any updates needed? And it goes and does that. Wonderful. And then at the end it says, oh, you do have updates. Would you like me to apply them now? Yes, please. Done. Total time involved for me, seconds. It's great. I didn't even have to touch the mouse. It's wonderful. So again, a little weird at first, but a very interesting way. Again, I'm using Claude locally on my desktop to do this. I have the desktop app installed, and it's a little jarring at first, Chris. I'll be honest. It's a little weird to think about administrating a system this way, but once you start using it, it's like that was pretty seamless.
You're getting into the Star Trek kind of future here, where you're literally just saying, attention computer, please do this.
Right.
And it's getting to that point where it might understand you a little bit better. We've come a long way since like the original, Dragon Naturally Speaking back in the day that we all tried to figure out how to make that recognize our voice.
Oh, those are pretty crude, but it can do other things too. You can do more administrative tasks like, hey, let me know what SMB shares I have active, or go review my telemetry over the last 30 days and graph it out for me. Tell me what my stats look like. Let's make a new share. My favorite actually is this weekend, we went and added support to deploy applications via the MCP as well. So I can say, look for this kind of app in the catalog, and it goes and searches and comes back with recommendations. Do you want to deploy that app? Yes. And it guides you through it wizard style. And depending on your LLM agent you're using of choice, someone will do nice little pop-ups and all that. They can get pretty fancy to ask you questions like, okay, how do you want to configure this? How do you want to set it up? Do you want to change any of the default values? All that good stuff. And then it goes and fires it off, deploys it, monitors the status, and lets you know when it's up and ready to be used. Pretty cool. So now the question people may ask is, well, how's this actually working? Well, first of all, there's nothing you're deploying on your TrueNAS at all. Really, all this is a tool that sits on your local desktop or laptop, basically is an interface between your LLM tool and then the TrueNAS. And in the middle, this MCP connector sits and just provides a defined set of tool calls to the LLM. So that when the LLM fires up for the first time, it talks to the MCP tool and says, hey, what functions do you expose? What can you do for me? Cool. Then the LLM, as a result of your prompting, knows, oh, well, he's asking me to go check app updates on my TrueNAS. I know I have a tool I can call to go check for that. And then internally, it calls the MCP tool, and it's mapping that back to the relevant TrueNAS API calls and returning the results in a manner that the LLM can parse and interact with and take the next steps. And sometimes it could be one tool calls multiple API calls. Sometimes that tool also has instructions to the LLM to say, hey, the user is going to ask to deploy or create a new SMB share, for example. You should prompt them to understand if they want to use an existing data set or create a new one. And if create a new one, here's the call for that, and the LLM kind of stitches it all together and makes it happen.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is something, like you said, you have to give a defined set of tools. So this doesn't mean you're giving the LLM just full access. This isn't the
No.
same as just telling it, hey, here's an SSH credential or here's my root credentials to
Yes.
my TrueNAS. So I know people are going to be worried about that. They're saying, hey, what's going to stop this, from having one of those famous Twitter incidents where, you see it on there where it says, oops, I apologize. I accidentally, RMRF'd your entire storage system, Chris.
This is where you got to be careful, because some people I have seen have done this, where they go and they give their LLM access again to SSH with root or with a set of credentials, and it can run whatever command it wants. And if you don't catch it in time, it might run the wrong thing. The MCP gives it more of that, the safety rails in place to say, here's the defined tools, here's what they can and can't do. And we, as we're developing the MCP, make choices to say which tools we expose. So for example, we have not given any destructive capabilities in the MCP. So the LLM cannot inadvertently go and delete a data set or delete a pool or do anything which would be considered destructive. It can create, it can manage, it can do some things like start and stop, some of those good things. Again, maybe annoying if you disrupt, for example, you started or stopped an app you didn't mean to, sure, but that's way different from I deleted the data set, very different situation. But, down the road, as LLMs get smarter and as safety improves, there may be cases where you do want to have extra features where it's like, yeah, I do want to go clean up that snapshot or delete that data set. Not at this stage. This is, again, research preview. We're just barely getting our feet wet here and trying this out. And the way it works, it is using API keys. So depending on the API key you generate in the TrueNAS, that's another level of restriction, because you can generate an API key that doesn't have, full administrator access, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Don't give it the potential for it to delete things. You can say, even if it does somehow make a mistake or, you have a malicious LLM, you've fired up a local instance of HAL 9000 and it's trying to delete your stuff. It's going to get roadblocked a couple different ways. The MCP will stop it, and then the TrueNAS API will stop it to say, TrueNAS will be the one saying, I'm sorry, I won't let you do that.
But please, for the love of God, don't give it SSH access with root credentials into your box. Like, that's just a path to sadness. Please don't do that to us.
Yeah. I mean, even in human written scripts, using SSH is not the way we want you doing things. We wrote that API so you can have all the sort of programmatic and easily defined access to it. Hey, start using the APIs. They're really useful. If you do want to make up some scripts together for it, then absolutely, you can point an LLM to the API documentation because, hey, they're pretty good when you tell them these are the exact commands you are capable of running and what they all can do, and you even get defined results back as to what it should expect.
Yeah. So I guess big picture, people might be asking, well, what does this mean? Well, it depends on what the user response is over time. The idea of using LLMs as a natural user interface. Again, this is a research preview. We're just putting it out there to get feedback and see where the industry kind of goes. This could be the start of something big trend-wise. I mean, I'll admit, when I first started using this, it is jarring, right? It's not how my brain is used to thinking about how I administrate a system. But, I'm thinking back, when I was much younger, before, I remember when the mouse came out. That's how old I am. That's weird to say. But, where we went from DOS prompts and terminals and all that to I have a GUI and I'm clicking around and all that. So maybe we're coming full circle. Maybe the day's coming back where it's going to be a lot of text prompts or Star Trek style voice commands that become kind of vogue again. And that's the way we administrate systems. Time will tell. It really depends on what the industry shifts to and what humanity shifts to, how we prefer to interface with our computer counterparts. But all that said, how can you get involved? So feel free to download, test, give us feedback on the forums. Again, this is a research preview, so it's not officially supported. All the usual cautions apply. Don't use it with production systems and production data. Be careful, all that good stuff. We'll open a thread on the forums and link it to the weekly podcast thread as well. So if you guys want to have some discussion, share your experiences, what you did with it, what you loved, what you hated, where it was brilliant, where it failed, that would be awesome. I'll give you an example as something I was just testing the other day was I deployed the Gitea app, which is like a GitHub clone you can run locally on your TrueNAS. And, I just said, hey, go find this in the catalog. It found it. It presented me a nice little wizard style. It asked some questions about, hey, here's the location I think you want for the default data sets to get created. Yeah, that looks good. It asked some other questions like, what's the host name? And then it went and did it. It worked perfectly on the first try, which was pretty cool. And then the second thing I wanted to do was there's a Gitea runner you can deploy as well for running like GitHub style actions. And it was able to go to the catalog, find that, read the description, understood that it needed a deploy key to connect it to the first Gitea instance. And it prompted me to say, hey, could you go get me this key out of your UI? It told me where to go get it. I grabbed it. I pasted it in the LLM. It deployed it. I mean, total investment time for me from nothing to getting this set up was maybe 30 seconds of actual me interacting with it. The AI did some work. It took a minute or two to go pull images and deploy and all that, but it was pretty seamless. Now, again, it may not be that way for every application, but it's pretty cool to see. It is interesting. And if you're a geek like me, you might want to go try it out.
Absolutely. It's one of those interesting sort of emerging ways to do things. And that's why we're exposing it for everybody sort of preview and testing out. Again, the URL for that one is labs.truenas.com. Jump in there, give it a shot. And again, jump into the forums. We'll give you a link down in the description below where you can go and talk about all the different things that are going on in the TrueNAS Labs. Give us our feedback, and no doubt Kris and some of the other engineering team are going to be in there having a look, reviewing, and maybe responding if you get a moment between it.
Sounds good. Looking forward to hearing the feedback.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today for both our wrap up of what was just released and our preview of what's to come. Again, please do those usual YouTube things for us. Give us the like and the subscribe there. I know Kris doesn't want me, trying to tell his AI to give him an MCP that's limited to Perl. I don't know if that
we wrote it in Golang, by the way. No Perl was involved here under no circumstances.
So does that mean you're not allowed to use that when I make you code in Perl for a week?
No, that's not going to happen because people are going to go like and subscribe and spare me that pain. So nobody wants that.
All right, that sounds. I mean, I don't want that either. I don't want us to have to start coding in Perl either. But hey, if you have any further questions for us, again, jump onto the forums at forums.truenas.com. Send us an email in. It's t3@truenas.com again. Jump into the comments section. Give us some feedback below. We always appreciate reading it. And again, if we're going to use your question in an episode, we'll try to call you out and give you a reply just to let you know, hey, we're going to answer it. You probably want to tune in this upcoming week. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Kris and I will see you next time.